My name is Ann Reed. I'm the president of the Darien LWV Voters, and we are very happy to have you all here, and we're delighted to have our legislators here to talk to us. I am going to start. I'm going to introduce the legislators. I'm going to ask a couple of questions that the league and myself have very deep in our hearts, and then I'm going to open it up to you guys. If you don't have questions, I have backup questions, but I'm hoping that you will elicit a lot of answers from our legislators. All right, so hang on a minute. There we go. Starting with Senator Bob Duff of Connecticut's 25th District, represents Norwalk and Darien. Bob is the majority leader of the Connecticut Senate and chair of the Executive and Legislative Nominations Committee and vice chair of the Legislative Management Committee. Say that 5 times fast. Bob formerly chaired the Housing, Banking, and Energy and Technology Committees. Thank you, Bob, for being here. Senator Cece Mars of the Connecticut 26th District. She represents parts of 8 towns: Weston, Wilton, Westport, Ridgefield, Darien, New Canaan, and Stamford.
And Reading.
And Reading, sorry. I have it here, I didn't read it.
Yeah.
Cece is chair of the Children's Committee and vice chair of the Higher Education and Employment Advancement Committee, and a member of the Energy and Technology, Human Services, Judiciary, and Internship Committees. Representative Tom O'Day of the 125th Assembly District represents New Canaan and Darien. Tom is the Deputy House Minority Leader and a member of the Environment, Judiciary, Transportation, and Legislative Management Committees.
And North Stanford.
Oh, and North Stanford, I'm sorry, Tom, and North Stanford. Representative Tracy Marr of the 141st Assembly District represents Darien and Norwalk. Tracy is a member of the Education, Public Health, and Transportation Committees. So, just to start, I've been thinking about this. This was your first session last year. As first-time legislators, I wanted to ask, did it meet your expectations? How was it? Cece.
You go first. Yeah, I guess sure. I'm going first.
You're going first, Cece.
Okay. How was it? Honestly, it's like drinking from a fire hose. Truly. Like, there's so much to learn. And in wanting to represent the district well and the towns well, there's so much to learn about every single town. And then the legislative process is different. And even though I've watched it from afar for a long time, it was an enormous learning experience, and I always wanted to do things right. I who knows me, that's like a guiding thing for me, is to do it right. But you can't always do that. The very first day that I was sworn in, and the next day I was running a committee meeting, because you're a chair of a committee immediately. So it was fascinating and interesting, and I was really quiet for the first 3 months because I was watching everything and watching everyone and trying to understand. But I think I found my feet.
Great. And Tracy?
Yes. So I think it's very, at least my understanding, the Senate and the House is very different. There's a lot of camaraderie down in the House. So you come in already and you've got across the aisle, there's really good friendships that are made, and there's a lot of people that have really good hearts there. So I have thoroughly enjoyed, and I didn't think that this was an expectation. This was not an expectation. I thoroughly enjoyed people, my side, across the aisle, getting to know them, getting to see their passions on things. The thing that I did not expect is how many people are up there that are not elected officials. What the heck? There are bureaucrats, lobbyists, they come at me from every which way, and I am telling everybody who I met that was not either an elected official, if I met you this past year, please reintroduce yourself, because that part eluded me. Yes.
Oh, Pat, hi.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm sorry, I'm just coming from Hartford.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for the invitation.
So we were just doing I was introducing everybody, and so I can now introduce you. So Senator Pat Billy Miller of Connecticut's 27th District represents Stamford and Darien. Pat chairs the Banking Committee Pat is vice chair of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committees, and is a member of Education, Commerce, and Judiciary Committees. So now everybody's here. So I am now on the board, the state board for the League of Women Voters and handling advocacy. So you'll be seeing me in Hartford. And as you can imagine, at the League of Women Voters, our prime interest is people voting, expanding access to voting, making voting easier and available to as many people as possible. Therefore, we were thrilled when early voting passed last session, and we are very interested in the constitutional amendment for no excuse absentee voting that will be on the ballot in November. One thing that concerns us a lot is that the Secretary of State has no budget for education and for the implementation of early voting in the 169 municipalities that exist in Connecticut. So I'd like to ask if you guys would, one by one, tell us if you support the provision of funds for the Secretary of State to develop programs for education, to support training for poll workers for early voting, and for education for the no excuse absentee voting ballot amendment. Senator Duff, you want to?
Yeah, sure. Good evening, everybody. Great to be here. Thanks to you all for arranging this again. So I was really happy that when the voters did pass the early voting, because we're one of a few states that does not have early voting, and we're considered, all the work we've done with being able to register voters and trying to make it easy at the DMV or other means, we were considered one of the most restrictive states in the nation because we don't do early voting and we didn't have the no excuse absentee balloting. Again, in our state constitution, it's very restrictive for absentee balloting, and we saw during COVID how many people really participated through absentee balloting and the drop boxes, that kind of stuff. And so we needed to, now once the public emergency was over, we needed to try and see if we could change that again to remove that restriction. And if that happens, then the legislature will codify that like we did with the early voting amendment as well. So to your question about the funding for education, I mean, I would certainly support that because I don't, while we're all talking about it, and I would imagine most people here know about early voting, if you went downstairs or you went down to the Darien Diner or just walked around, I'm not sure most people are aware of that because it's going to take a few years to get into the people's kind of habit or of doing that or thinking about it. And we want, the whole idea was for more people to participate. The Secretary, I don't recall any conversations last year, maybe we did, I just don't remember, for what she needed for funding for that, so I'm open to that conversation. I do know that we are working to get new machines because the machines are older and they need to be updated as well, but I think Connecticut has done really well. I remember when we got the new machines after the HAVA Act and federally, and that we all wanted that paper ballot and everything else, so we should be getting that as well. So anyway, so I do support it. I'm not sure how much she's asking for though.
Well, I know that they had an education budget of $2 million previously, and that's now zero.
Okay.
So that's a start.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Senator Miller?
So, early voting, yes. For me, it's about access, right? And if it wasn't for the absentee ballots, I wouldn't be here today because it was March, cold, it was a bitter cold day. And so it's about individuals having access. We saw again during COVID that the numbers were historic, and it's because of that. So yes, I do support absentee ballot and the funding for early voting as well. And education is very important. I think that, I was having a conversation with Deep regarding electric vehicles, and it's about education. We have to educate people to let them know that what's available. And so I think to send the poll workers into the polls without educating them, it's not fair to them. And so I definitely believe in funding, and I think that if we put an initiative forth like that. I think that we have to be open to it, as my colleague stated.
Yeah, and I think timing is crucial, because I know Stephanie has said she has money for each town to train for the primary, but then she doesn't have it for the general election. So this is time crucial as well. Senator Marr?
There's no question in my mind that we need to be funding education of poll workers, of voters, getting information out on the referendum for no excuse absentee ballots and voting. And I know that when I knocked on 4,000 doors when I was running 2 years ago, and I know that so many people, they'd say, oh, Senator, how often do you go down to DC? And I'm like, no, state senator, up to Hartford. So many people don't understand what it takes to have a legislature in Hartford, what it is to be a senator or a representative, how many people that you represent. And it's essential that we educate our voters and that we get the message out about why it's important. No excuse absentee voting is so important. I know that when I was canvassing, door knocking, I would tell everyone about the referendum to allow for early voting. And people didn't know, but that was part of everything. Every person that I spoke to, I made sure to talk to them about that as well. I've talked to a lot of registrars, and I think they are on the front lines, and we need to support them. And
We have at least one here.
okay, well, I'm in your camp.
Representative O'Day?
So I'm probably not making fans with some people here. I was opposed to the early voting because of my concerns on cost to municipalities, because of what we're seeing right now. I was very much in favor of the no excuse absentee balloting, because you could do that with very little extra cost to municipalities. But I was willing to compromise on the early voting, I think maybe a few days as opposed to the amount of time that we ended up with. But it is what it is, and I agree with open access. More access is great, but at what cost? And I think with no excuse absentee balloting, you really eliminated the need for the early voting. But it's here, and so education, absolutely support it. I'm concerned about the drop boxes, which we've articulated. You saw the fraud that happened in Bridgeport. And so what I'm hoping we can do, in working with my good colleagues, by the way, Darien is very lucky. You've got 3 great senators. Most towns only have 1. You've got 3, and they're all very good and have a lot of sway, and they're very easy to work with. So you should be very proud of your senators, and I think your state rep, Tracy, although she's only been 1 term, I think she's one of the smartest and hardest working people up in Hartford. So you're very well served there as well. But with regard to the education, we obviously have to do it, we have to fund it. I'm very concerned about the ballot boxes and the drop boxes. Let's put them at least put them in the town clerk's office. If you're gonna still have them, I don't think you need them anymore, but if you are gonna have them, put them in the town clerk's office and have them monitored, because what we saw happen, if you can't trust your election process, your democracy ends, and we need to have better trust in our election process. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Representative Marr?
So, yeah, thank you, and I think, a lot of the issues have already been discussed, so, and I will say, early voting, yeah, I was okay with early voting, but even Stephanie Thomas said that 14 days was gonna be too much. And I just would like to give kudos out to her, because she is, one of the things that I wanna see in government is transparency. And she is actually working with the registrar of voters and the town clerks, and she is listening to their concerns. And she showed up at the state Republican Party and talked to us, the state of Connecticut, the Republican Party, and talked to us and educated us from that way. She is willing to go across the aisle, and I appreciate that. So I think we really need to listen to her when it comes to either educating or what the towns need. And we all are chasing our tails right now, because we voted this in, and we didn't think about how much it was going to cost. Come on, folks! Like, we should have. We knew this was going to cost our towns and yet we still voted for it. I mean, you want it, that's fine, but you should have thought about the money at the beginning. This all should have been thought about, and I know Stephanie Thomas did understand this, and now she is working hard for everybody to get this up and running, so.
She is, thank you.
Yeah.
Would anyone like to ask a question?
I have a question. You kind of seem, and maybe I'm misinterpreting what you said as far as you're not, you don't want any more than 14-day early voting. Is that because it's an incremental cost, or did I mishear what you're saying about
Every
the
day
yes?
you add in extra voting, you have an extra cost to the town. Yes,
Okay.
right. And what we don't know, what I've yet to see is any real evidence that going longer actually increases the votes that you have coming in. Like, that's what we want to see. We want to have it accessible. We want to have it robust. We want people to vote. How many days do you have to keep adding, and what kind of incremental increase is that? And that's what we don't see from 14 days. The information's not out there. There's no.
But since we haven't had it, there's no way to track that. I
We
mean,
can
it's-
see it from other states. Yes.
Krista?
Kind of as a follow-up question, as I am responsible for ordering the ballots for our municipality, what, from your research, which was done prior to approving this legislation, what percentage of increase do you expect with the introduction now of early voting? What were the studies saying? So obviously that's a goal, to get more people voting.
Right.
So what do the studies show?
It's been a long time since I read that, so I don't remember.
Okay.
So Bob,
Do you remember that, Susan?
I don't remember it, but what I can tell you is we do look at all of it, but there is so much. Remember what I said at the beginning, that we have to know so much. We cannot keep all of those things in our mind, especially because we're now 10 months beyond the time that we made that decision, but that decision was informed and we looked at it. I know you're looking shocked that I don't have that at the top of my head.
Just a ballpark number.
But I don't
even.
think there is an increase. I mean, we talked to, I think Stephanie Thomas had on, was it someone from Wisconsin? Wisconsin or Wyoming that did, can't remember which state, one of the W states. That
It
did
was, I think
this
it was
and-
Wyoming.
Wyoming. And I asked the question, I asked it like 3 times, I typed it out 3 times, and it was never asked because they hadn't seen an increase in turnout.
Yeah, I put the question, I was actually up there today, I must have been on the highway a couple hours before you, up there with Secretary of State Thomas. I am interested to know, what is the increase? What is the goal? Obviously, the goal conceptually is more people voting, which is admirable, and I think we're all in agreement. But what do the numbers show of those people who will benefit and take advantage with now early voting?
Well, I think in Connecticut, we have to see, right?
Well, they've studied, I mean,
Seen it in
they've done the
states.
studies of 10 other states. I just haven't seen the numbers, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, and look, it was 10 months ago. I remember the report that I read before I met with Stephanie in my office. I dog-eared it, I highlighted it. I just can't recall it, but I think we're looking at at least I am anyway. I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but a lot of us were looking at this along with no excuse absentee balloting as a package to say, okay, what are we doing? We also, in that legislation, for the 14 days, there are times when weekend has to be weekends, there are times when it has to be at night, during the day, as you know, I'm informing everyone else, so that it wasn't done in a vacuum to say, okay, it's got to be 9 to 5, or every day it's got to be 6 to 8, or whatever. These are very, sprinkled around, and then we can see. We'll see for a few years. Reason why we're kind of still stuck on the first question, which is the education piece. That's going to make a difference, because either if we do the education, we'll see how many people actually turn out, especially in the presidential year, or if it's not as robust as we want, maybe because we do or don't have the education, we'll have to see, and then we'll have to see how the constitutional question goes as well. So, I think, but my understanding was everything I read, there was a reason for 14 days, because there were people who wanted it shorter, and there was a spirited debate on
You
that.
wanted 2 weekends.
There's
I
just,
understand,
yeah,
right?
but there was a reason why that was done, and what I recall was that once it was that amount of time, that was what provided more participation if you did a little bit longer. If you did it shorter, people didn't always realize, or they forgot, or whatever, so if you had it more, and then you couple that with the education, I think you can get more folks out.
So my only last comment is, so 90% of the time, we're in agreement. And I do want to congratulate, unlike Washington, in Hartford, things do work. Okay, we work together. Most things are bipartisan. And I have to give credit to the Democratic leadership for doing that. This is the one time, 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 20, where I think they got it wrong, because my argument was, let's do the no excuse absentee balloting, let's see how that impacts, and then let's do early voting and see how that impacts it. And so look at them both separately. And my compromise position that I tried to get going, so my job up in Hartford, I've been there for only 12 years, Bob's in year 22, but I run the floor for the House Republican. So I'm interacting with the Speaker and the Majority Leader before it goes to the Senate or after it comes down from the Senate. And 90% of the time, we're compromising, working together. This is the one time I would say that they really didn't want to listen to us on that staged process. And they could turn out, maybe they're going to be right on this. I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think my compromise was going to be, let's do a weekend. Let's do a Friday, Saturday type of thing, in addition to the no excuse. I thought the no excuse was outrageous, that we had to have excuses. So I thought that was a perfect solution for the short term. But in any event, let's see what happens.
Okay.
And I am positive that the people here are going to see what happens, and maybe we can react and make things better if we need to.
So Tom said nice things, we like
Yeah.
him too.
That's true. No, it's tough. You know, it's.
I know.
All right, so
We're all
moving
together.
on, moving on from early voting and no excuse absentee voting, does anyone in the audience have a question they would like to ask one of the legislators?
What's the cost of having the ballot box?
The
You said
cost?
incremental cost every single
No,
day.
that's,
What is that?
it's not the ballot box, it's
I mean,
paying the
it's the
workers.
staff.
Poll workers,
Staffing.
staffing, rentals,
And
locations.
what are we talking about?
I don't have the numbers slide.
Across the state, it's millions of dollars.
You have to have one poll worker working a full-time day minimum.
There's required staff, moderator, et cetera.
Come be a poll worker, we need
That's true.
I wasn't.
Well, won't the efficacy of early voting really be proven in the off years, in the municipal elections, where the turnout is so low? Presidential years, you get a 90% turnout in this town and probably 70, 80% in a lot of other towns. But in our municipal elections, we get a 20 to 30% turnout if we're lucky. And I would think that the real proof in the pudding is going to be when we see what the turnout of the, election's going to be, when people can vote, early voting in these municipal elections.
I mean, that's the thing, David, is that I hear folks all the time, especially we all hear probably in October, right before the election, early November, I just got called out of town on a business trip. There's no time to do an absentee ballot. I guess I'm gonna not be able to vote. And with early voting, there's that opportunity. Now, it's not a guarantee, but it's an opportunity for folks to be able to hopefully get a chance to vote. Now, maybe they can do the no excuse absentee balloting. We'll see how that all works out if it passes. But at least there's more opportunities for somebody to say, okay, I can't vote on election day because I'm getting called out of town, but I can maybe come in the day before that, or whenever. Why not? So.
I'm sorry, I just want to pick up on that point then. So currently we have absentee voting, and the legislature, I personally don't agree with the restrictive adjective to it. It is defined. But if you're out of town at any point during the day, on election day, you may vote absentee. If you're concerned about illness. So how do you see early voting enhancing this process than the absentee ballot process, which is more extensive? That's 31 days prior to election day. So how do you see early voting being more effective in getting people to vote than the absentee process, which is a longer period of time?
Because I think sometimes people, if they think that, oh, I can just go in and vote, rather than, they may not think about an absentee ballot, or they may say, oh, I got to do an application, then I got to do the actual ballot. What I've heard from folks is that it seems cumbersome to them.
So I really want to move on, because first of all, early voting has already been voted on, and it's happening. Okay? I just want to make sure that the word gets out so people know. And the fact that the secretary does not have a budget to do that concerns me greatly. And I just want to make sure we get her some money. Because I think she's fair, and I think she's smart, and I think she'll do stuff the right way. So, Mr. Burke.
For those of you who are involved in education committees or not, as you look at municipality budgets that are so driven by education concerns, how do you balance the role of what you think is important for all the communities in the state with the individual needs and circumstances of the particular towns that you represent? Darien, for instance, if you listen to our Board of Education meetings, lots of conversations about mandates coming down from Hartford. Are they helpful? Are they impacting on cost? How do you balance those?
Well, I'm not in education. but
I'm on education, so I think that I've been on education since 2009, and we hear that all the time about mandates, and so it is a problem. I mean, it's an issue. I think that me personally, I look at what's best for the students, and we as adults, we have to figure it out. There are some things that we're going to have to mandate. And I think that and I understand the impact, especially Darien, you don't get that much ECS monies, right? And so it's really coming out of your budget. And so I'll be honest with you, we really don't think about how it impacts the municipalities as much as how it impacts the students if we don't do it. And so I do know that there is a committee that's working, a task force that's working on the mandates. Because we do understand that it is a problem. But I can tell you that we're more conscientious about it now than we were when I first started. But it's difficult to balance because if there's something that would benefit the students, what do you do as a state? Because we're responsible for the education of the state, not just our district. Because if we don't have the workforce that we need, the skilled workforce, what happens to our economy?
Because
And so
Pat, I
those
think
kind of
Jeff
things we have to
Curry
look at.
is running that task force to figure out
The
mandates
mandates.
that maybe are passed, should
Should
be
be-
relooked at, should be gotten rid of.
So they are doing that.
He is doing that, yeah.
I'd also just like to say that Doug McCrory is our Senate Chair of the Education Committee. And he works very well, at Tom's point, with Senator Eric Berthel from Southbury. And most of the legislation, I'd say 99% of it that comes out of the Education Committee is bipartisan, and that it flies through the Senate because they have worked those things out. Now, there may be some mandates in there, maybe not, but whatever it is, they have worked it out and viewed it to be either not onerous or achievable, or one that is in the best interest of the students, to Senator Miller's point. But I last, I don't know, at least 5, 6, 7 years, the Education Committee has really worked and strived to be very bipartisan and to be conscientious of a lot of those mandates, as far as from my perch, what I can see.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm also on the Education Committee, and I would agree that, we have a lot of bipartisan things that pass in education. I think that, Senator Miller pointed out, and her, had some legislation go through, and with a very thoughtful need that we need to see better reading scores on our kids. Our reading scores are bad, and so, I wasn't there, but this was a really good effort on the Education Committee's docket and got passed. What I think, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Senator Miller about it, what I think is that there seems to be some sort of by the time it passed out of our committee, by the time it got to the State Department of Education, and then the waivers were implemented, it's been a fiasco. It is. We have all kinds of towns across the state that are really upset because they did not get their waivers on this, which means that they're going to have to buy curriculum that could be up to $1 million out of their budget. This is huge. And we have Board of Eds and we have superintendents that are shocked. And just so you know, Darien did not get a full waiver. I mean, that should really, shock us.
Can I ask, what if we don't buy it?
Right.
What if we just don't follow?
Sure, that is certainly an option. Now, in all fairness, the superintendent and the Board of Ed have looked at the scores, and they do see that there's a gap that they were planning on filling anyway with some of their vocabulary. So I know they are working on it, and that is something they were going to be focused on anyway. But the process, the hundreds of pages that had to go in for this waiver, the amount of time it took to get the assessment, the lack of communication back and forth between the Department of Education and the Board of Ed, it's not working. And I mean, I would love to talk with you more about this, because I think that we need to have more conversation with our State Department of Education they need to be facilitating learning. They need to help learning with our kids. They don't need to be putting the heavy hand down.
May I? Sure. So, as my colleague stated, this is one time that we disagree. First of all, we had changed the implementation date from 2023 to 2025. That's the first thing we've done. We put in almost $25 million into this program. We know that we're going to have to fund some additional, there's going to have to be additional funding. But I want to remind my colleague that if someone submitted a 100-page waiver, that was their choice. It wasn't required. What was required was that whatever you submitted had to be based on the science of reading and those components. Now, the individuals that did not receive the waiver, it's my understanding that they were based on balanced literacy, which is the Teachers College. So what the state was asking for was to submit your waiver based on the components that are in the law. And the components, so it's literacy, comprehension, phonics, and the like. So, but no district it's my understanding, no one was required to submit a 100-page document for the waiver. We understand as adults that change is difficult, change is hard. And the law is based on the science of reading. It's teaching, we know the science tells us that children have the ability to read. And when studies say that 95% of children have the ability to read, you really need to look at how we're doing business. So I hear, well, it's a high-performing district. So is it really a high-performing district or high-performing parents who have the resources to add to whatever the district is doing as far as teaching our children? So it wasn't to make it onerous for districts, but it's to make sure that every child has the opportunity to read. Because even if you're 75%, that means that you have 25% of your students that are not reading. And so what are you saying to those parents who have 25% of their students aren't reading? Are you saying it's not important? So it's my understanding, because I'm not in the room, that SDE is working with the districts. But the law says it has to be, whatever you submit has to be, or whatever you're doing has to be submitted based on the science of reading and whatever those components are.
So the only add I'll make to that is, so McCann and Darien are either one or two in the state, or three, generally speaking.
We can have a fist fight about that later.
Yes. Well, now that I'm part of Darien, I can say go Blue Wave, but then go Rams. Anyway, no, but I think the problem is there's a disconnect with the State Department of Education, because the law actually says a waiver shall be granted when you prove X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. And if you're the number one or number two performing district, the state should be learning from us, not us learning from them. And our parameters, we've got a higher reading literacy in our student bodies than even the programs when they're implemented in other states. So I think the State Department of Education has a disconnect on allowing waivers. That's the problem. And I think we all can agree with everything you said. I think the waiver process, though, is broken, and that's what we need to address. And I was going to,
Which is what?
Yes.
Yes. Teresa.
So I just want to comment on the whole science of reading and the way you guys are looking at it, and I have to agree with Senator Miller. One, yes, we are a high performing district, but we are a district that parents are willing to pay for the gaps. And it happens, I see it, I've done it myself. My kids went through the Darien schools. I know how they were taught to read, and it was not with phonics. I'm lucky my kids picked it up, but reading should be taught with phonics, which is what the science of reading is. Two, you can't look at it in the short term, what is this going to cost, the curriculum change. You have to look at the long term. We have a very high special education budget, and you have to look how much of that, and I can't speak for New Canaan, but I can speak for Darien, how much of that is literacy issues that could have been solved if we had the science of reading here. So I don't think you can look at this, oh my gosh, this curriculum is going to cost us $1 million. You have to look at it, how much will this save us in the long term in special education costs? Because I can tell you it'll probably be significant. So I actually volunteer in the Norwalk Public Schools that do use the science of reading, and I have been amazed by watching these 8-year-olds sound out words that my kids were not taught to do. So, I mean, I really think we have to look at the science of reading in the long term and not the short term.
Yeah, just so you know, the curriculum's changed since our kids went through in the elementary.
Not here.
Yes,
Not here, Nan.
No, it hasn't.
Yes,
It has not.
No,
It has not.
Okay.
No, it hasn't.
I'm not
Okay.
getting involved in that one. New Canaan.
Sorry, can I just, yeah,
The
sorry.
head of the RTM Education Committee would now like to ask.
No, I'm speaking for myself, sorry. I had a boss for a long time. One of the things he used to say was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And to me, there are many things that we could be doing better in our schools here, but this is not one of them. This is not something where I think we needed help from the state to do.
I agree.
Okay. So, from my perspective, it is broken when you have 19,000 third graders who cannot read.
In Darien.
In the
I'm
state.
talking about Darien.
Okay, so I don't know how many are in Darien. I don't know how many in Darien, but as a policy, someone who's responsible for policy, we also have to look at the state. Because if we have 19,000 children who can't read, then that hurts the state. It hurts the economy of the state. So just rounding off the numbers, there are approximately 6,000 white students. There are approximately 8,000 Hispanic and 3,000 black students that can't read. 8,000 of that 19,000 are special ed. The other 11,000 are everyone else. And it's believed that the children and the students in special ed, that if you give them the resources, the tools that you can use with the science of reading, that maybe they won't be in special ed, and that will reduce the cost of special ed. But I understand your perspective, that you're worried about Darien. But as a policymaker, we have to worry about the state because it impacts the economy of our state, and we want skilled workers in our state.
I agree, I understand, and I guess, to me, from our perspective, this is all avoided if we got the waiver, right? You get the policy change that you want, and if Darien is able to do it under the system that it has, and it gets a waiver, then everybody's should be happy.
Can I jump in, Rob?
Sure.
Okay, you finish.
I'm sorry, I don't,
No, go ahead.
I don't.
No, I was
I hear you.
just gonna say that I think there's a kind of a misperception that this issue is a urban versus suburban or rural issue, or this is a high-income district versus a low-income district. If you look at, and Pat is far more versed at this than I am, but what I've read and what I've heard from parents is that this is an issue that affects every single district, whether you're high performing, low performing, or somewhere in between, whether you're a high income district or low income district or somewhere in between. Special ed, as Teresa said, absolutely. So while Darien and New Canaan have great numbers, that doesn't mean that they are free from the problems of reading comprehension for our kids and making sure that they have the ability to read. Maybe your kids are fine, I have no idea. I sometimes wonder, like, I wonder if my kids learn to read correctly or anybody else, but because it doesn't, even if we're parents who are teaching our kids, sometimes they may not be learning it correctly because they're not learning it correctly in school. So I think that's why this is out there, but I just want to make sure that people aren't thinking that this is, say, Norwalk or Stanford issue and it's not a Darien issue, because that's just not the case. This impacts pretty much kids all across the state of Connecticut.
So on a slightly related but different proposal, that throwing out here.
Are you gonna do like last year where you jumped up with your list of 50 bills?
No. So this is National School Choice Week. And Connecticut has 20 charter schools, and we've got a ton of private schools, and a number of Catholic schools which are also private. Colby Cathedral in Bridgeport has a 100% graduation rate, and it costs, the tuition is about $8,900. Stanford's got a charter school, the number one in the state, that's one of 4 blue ribbon schools in Connecticut, and they've got an amazing outcome, and it costs $10,000. The typical, and again, Senator Miller has forgotten more than I know, so I would defer to her on it, but I think the voucher program or school choice program, where only half the money the state gives out would go with the child, would be, you've seen more desegregation, you've seen better outcomes at the schools where you've got school choice. I know that's a hot topic, but in National School Choice Week, it's something worth discussing, I think, and I would love to get a hearing at education and see the negatives, because I don't see them, but I know they're existed, and I know the unions are opposed to it, but I think it's something to talk about. That's all I'm saying, that I would ask, and I would love to hear from you all what you think on school choice, because I think Colby Cathedral is an amazing opportunity, and they do it for half the cost of what public schools do. Now, but public schools need to be better supported.
It's not quite apples to
I was
apples.
gonna say.
though.
Right, I agree. I know it's not, because you've got the special needs in educational system in public schools. So I know it's not apples to apples, but I'm just hoping for a hearing.
Yes, I'm not the chair.
I know.
I'd like to introduce a new topic, which also may be controversial to some degree. You mentioned talking to DEEP, right? There were so many climate bills that were introduced last year that went nowhere. And I know there's a lot of discussion about requiring the state to use only electric vehicles in the future, which has been, there's been a lot of discussion and negative, some positive. How you feel about the future of electric vehicles in Connecticut, and any mandate that might come down about getting rid of fossil fuel vehicles in the future. Senator Duff, what do you think?
You keep
Ooh,
looking
the
at me.
environmental person.
Do you want me to start?
I'm not having to say anything about anything, but
I can guess what you're going to say.
I can guess too.
Yeah, so
it'll
I'll
be one of
start.
those areas we disagree.
So here's the thing. We have, in Connecticut, we agreed to go with the California standard. And we made that decision, what, 2007?
No, before that.
Or way before that?
2004.
2004, I think.
Okay, so 2004, we made the decision to go with the California standard, not the federal standard, because the California standard, and this was bipartisan, by the way, the California standard is a higher level of standard. It was bipartisan, as I was told. Oh, something else? Okay. And now we're relitigating that. What you all need to know is, in 2035, the car companies have said they are no longer producing combustion engines. Okay? So what we're saying in this discussion, I'm saying, in EVs, is we are going to continue to go with the California standards, which is no combustion engines, new cars being sold by 2035 in Connecticut. That doesn't mean we're not going to have combustion engines. It means that we are going to not sell new combustion engines. Now, what that is California is the behemoth in the car buying industry. If we do not go with this 2035 measure, it means that we then have less EVs coming into our state, because they will go to other states that are already aligned with that. So that's number one. The second thing is, emissions are 40% of the air pollution. Car emissions, 40% of air pollution. We have to be doing every single thing we can for climate mitigation. We must. I don't know what happened 2 weeks ago in Darien. I didn't read it flooding. But I can tell you, in Westport, one of my other towns, it was underwater. The river was coming up across the parking lot. It wasn't just at the back of the stores in the main drag of Westport. It was in the front street. It was in the parking lots over by the library. It is frightening to me. I believe that we must leave a state for our children and our grandchildren that looks like the state that we have enjoyed. And if we don't get using vision about climate change, and the EVs is just one component of it. I sat this morning, I went to Stanford had a mini COP on climate this morning. And I went to that presentation, and the things they are doing with composting, with looking at electric vehicles in their fleets in Stanford, with bioswales that collect the water and keep the water from flowing into homes. They are really planning in Stanford, visionary planning around climate. And I believe every single one of our coastal communities should be doing the same. So back to EVs. If we can reduce emissions by 40%, why are we not doing it? And composting, I know this is my thing. Composting is really essential. That is another thing that Stanford's doing. They have 2 composting sites, but they're also doing anaerobic composting. They're going to be doing it at schools.
Digestion, anaerobic
Is that
digestion.
what it is?
Sorry?
Anaerobic digestion or?
Anaerobic digestion. I don't remember exactly the technical. I just know it works. I've been doing composting in my yard for 30 years. And I always dried my clothes on the line, and we never used fertilizers. And my children thought I was insane. Just saying. But anyway, now they think I'm brilliant. But do you know that composted vegetative waste is 25% more emissions? It produces methane, and it is 25% more than carbon dioxide. These are things we can be doing. These are not big lifts. If we can do it in the city of Stanford, you can do it in Darien. They're already doing it in Westport. Oh dear God, let us get on the path. So EVs is just one place. Sorry, you didn't expect all that, but you got
I
it.
knew that was going to happen, so that's.
I'm sorry, what?
I said that's why I knew that was going to happen.
More than happy to hear that.
Okay.
I'm happy to hear that that the companies are doing it. I'm not really sure why we have to mandate it, right? I think that this is going to be a natural progression. I have a hybrid car. I understand that right now, if I'm driving to Hartford and we get out at midnight, I'm gonna have to find a place to charge my car before I come home if I have all electric. So we need to get our grid, we need to get our infrastructure up and running, and I think it's gonna be a natural progression. I don't understand why we have to mandate this, why we have to push it. It should naturally occur. And if all the car companies are going to be making electric cars, that's all we're gonna have to buy anyway. So I'm not sure why the mandate in the heavy hand needs to happen.
So,
And I agree with that. I totally oppose the mandate. I think it's, all due respect, insanity at this point in time, because we need to have the infrastructure. Look at all, there was actually, I just saw, there's 138 deaths attributed to the lithium batteries going on fire in New York City alone, most of them with bikes, but still, the lithium batteries are not safe technology at this point in time. And
So
you
wait a
get
minute,
them wet.
Tom,
So-
that's
That's not. I'm bleeding from biting my lip when you were talking, so please. Let the private sector, I'm all for incentives to buy the EVs, okay? And count, if you make an income of 75,000 or more, you can't get the incentives, but incentivize, because I believe our urban communities, where are you gonna do the charging stations? California is an unmitigated disaster. They have rolling blackouts because they can't charge their cars. The lines, and do you know what percentage of charging stations are broken in Connecticut that don't work? It's over 50%. My building has 2 charging stations. They haven't worked in 3 years. So I had hybrid. I believe in hybrid technology. I'm not a believer in battery technology right now. Let's let the private sector come in and do it. But that's where we have respectful disagreement, and I think it's wonderful.
Senator Duff, you wanted to say something?
well, Senator Maher, I think, wanted to respond.
No, I just want to say, when you speak about the lithium batteries and the bicycles and the fires, yes, you are absolutely true, but the reason that is the case is because you're seeing a lot of, number one, your bicycle messengers are low income, minimum or below minimum wage scale. They are buying, they have to have multiple batteries, and they are buying them cheap lithium batteries from China that are not
What
regulated.
do you think we're gonna get when we go all EV?
No.
for
Okay, so
everybody
then
that's
again,
looking
can you
for-
let her
You're right.
finish, please?
All right,
Thank you.
sorry.
So what we need to have is we need to have regulations around lithium batteries, and we need to make sure, but lithium batteries are a huge, what I know is that when we do not put a line in the sand for where we want to go, then we don't get there. And that is why we're talking about this regulation, is because we need to put that line in the sand. And we need to do it with composting and lithium batteries and EVs and any kind of mitigation. Because if we don't do that, we will just, you all know, we just talked about education. If you don't give your kids a goal, they're not going to reach it for the most part. But they're like my kids. And my, should I just say that? And my daughter just was named CEO of NPR yesterday. But not because I drew a line in the sand with her. Anyway, but if we don't, I know we will not plan, and we must plan. We cannot keep kicking the can down the road and saying, oh, it's going to be okay, because it's not.
Can I ask a
Look-
question? I honestly do not know the answer to this. Obviously, a lot of the problem is stations to charge these things.
And
How,
grid.
how can the state incentivize the development of
We've
these
been doing
stations?
that already, though.
You're doing that?
Yeah.
But Tom's saying they, a lot of them don't work.
I don't know that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's wrong, I just don't know that.
Yeah.
But, Pat, did you want to say?
Nope.
something? Okay.
Nope.
So I would just, and I'll be quick.
I'll let the
But I would just say,
environmentalists
I would just say
decide
this, is that there's not this kind of false thing of if you don't do something, you don't have to do anything because it's just gonna, whatever. As Cece said, the companies basically said in 2035, they're gonna stop selling combustible engines. Not that everybody has to turn in their cars and their, and then get another electric car, that's not true. But there's the federal standard, there's two standards, you get to pick one. The federal standard and the California standard. Back in 2004, the legislature voted overwhelmingly in a bipartisan manner to follow California standards, like we do with appliances, like we do with a lot of other things, because California sets these standards, and either you follow them or you don't. So we follow them on appliances, and we follow them on cars and things like that. 2 years ago, we did a bill about light trucks following those California standards, or medium trucks too. That was not bipartisan. That was more of a partisan issue. Nonetheless, the federal standard and the California standards pretty much align until about 2028, I think it is, or somewhere around there. And then the California standard gets a little more aggressive. So one way or another, it's we're all kind of getting there anyway. It's just one's a little more aggressive than the other. Remember, we're talking 11 years from now, so it's not like it's tomorrow, it's not like it's next year or the year after. But the car companies need time to plan, because if they say, okay, if we join all these other states, which by the way is about 40% or so of the car market, they need to be able to plan to say how many cars do we need to build that are electric if Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New York, California, Colorado, Delaware, Maryland, all these other states are doing this, and we need that, their car market is whatever their car market is, so we need to make sure we have enough cars, and that's why we have to do that. We have worked since Governor Malloy was in office to be range confident, so that there are enough. Now, the issue of them not working, obviously that needs to be addressed. I also am in favor of tracking, and I've said this a few times, of tracking our progress to make sure that we are range confident. But I know for a fact, I've been to a GM place in Fairfield, you could literally, if you have an electric vehicle, you can OnStart and it will tell you if you're driving down to Florida where the next charging station is and where the next fast charging station is. So it's not like this is all done in a vacuum and there's no information out there. And the Inflation Reduction Act as well, that was voted on a year and a half ago, has a lot of money in there for that. We had money from the VW settlement that's putting in more charging stations. So it's happening, But I think you do have to set that marker so that the market knows, which everybody professes to be for the market knows what to anticipate and what kind of where the buyers are going to be.
Right.
You can get an electric car for virtually half price now. Go to Ford, I know there's some Chevy, Carl Chevrolet, they're half price what they were just 2 years ago,
A lot of
If
subsidies.
you can get them.
because they can't sell them.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to clarify the mandate. My understanding, the 2035 mandate is actually just to get rid of combustion engine cars, but still allow plug-in hybrids, as well as
Yes, I
electric
believe
vehicles,
that's
right?
It's
right.
not getting rid of.
No.
Or
No,
to
but
stop
not
selling,
selling,
to
stop
take-
selling.
But it's going to still allow plug-in hybrids, so there will still be some sort of combustion
Yeah.
engine plus hybrid technology.
I believe I
Just can't
think I
sell
heard
them.
that.
I don't think so.
No?
Gonna still have hybrids.
Yeah, that's
I think
right.
it is plug-in
Yeah.
plug-in hybrids will
Right.
be allowed, so it's not like you can't buy a car that
Well,
takes
It's
gas.
gonna be
Fully
all
combustion
electric.
Right,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well, we just don't know because we
I-
haven't seen it yet.
what's that?
Devil's in the details. We
Yeah.
haven't seen the legislation yet.
But I do believe with the notion that you have to set a goal in order to, force change. I mean, that's just the way change happens. But I do think that the lack of infrastructure and concerns about charging infrastructure could undermine people's confidence in going out and
100%.
buying a full. I am a full electric owner, and I do see the problems with the charging infrastructure in this state. It's not just this state, but like throughout the country. And so, I'm curious what the legislature is doing to try to build up that infrastructure. I know the federal government has some initiatives in place, but what is the legislature doing to help fund that or further those initiatives? Because I think if the charging infrastructure is there, that will attract more people and make people more confident in buying fully electric, if not plug-in hybrids.
Sure, go ahead.
So, in my conversation with the Commissioner of DOT, there are federal dollars that the Connecticut was given, and we do have charging stations, right? And there are rules that are attached, so they're not supposed, if they're broken, it's supposed to be repaired within a certain time. But he said there's an RFP that's going out, I think for $14 million, where they're building more charging stations. So we do have them, but they have to be along the highways. So they have to be along 95, and we may have a couple upstate, but most of them are down in this area. But that's where we're getting our monies from the federal government. And as far as the EVs, we know that we don't have the infrastructure now. But as my colleagues stated, it's 11 years out. And so I can tell you that some of the I'm chair of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, and we're in conversation with the governor about those issues, the charging stations. I'm told that Pura has a program for chargers, right? So we are doing some of this. And it goes back to education, but we're not really discussing it. It's like people don't know.
And I think that, to your point, that we've got to do a much better job of getting those chargers in homes.
Homes, yeah.
Because they're expensive, and you don't want somebody to put a regular plug into their car. It's going to take all day. Though, mind you, cars now I think have 450 miles or so, 350 miles.
It
range?
depends. Teslas have upwards of 400 miles in
Yeah.
the winter.
Yeah.
But not in the winter,
Yeah.
exactly. And we're a cold
Mine's
weather
about
state.
310
Okay.
Yeah.
for the walk.
Yeah. So the technology will get better
Hopefully, yeah.
over time. But I think, right, we have to worry that the chargers at home, right, and other types of things. And we should scale it to make sure we're on.
Multifamily, yeah.
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 All right, so we are drawing to the end of time. I would like to make a plea for something that's also very important to me as a poll worker. The gun safety legislation did not include prohibiting guns in polling places because most of the polling places were schools and guns were banned in schools. With early voting, that's changing. I know that Matt Blumenthal is going to introduce a bill this session to prohibit guns from polling places. I hope you will support it. As a poll worker, it would make me feel much safer. Anyway, I want to thank all of you for coming and all of our legislators. And we would love for you to join the League of Women Voters. We have information over on that table, or visit our website. And we would love to have you as members and have more informative sessions like this. I want to thank Bob Duff, Pat Billy Miller, Cece Marr, Tom O'Day, and Tracy Marr for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to make one comment. I was hoping to say, no, good thing. So your new treasurer, Democrat, Eric Austin, has done a great job, and he's mean tested. So basically, they are firing people who are not investing money and meeting parameters of what they expect. So our state pensions have done an amazing job in the last year and a half. And he's got an amazing team in place. So as a Republican, I met with the treasurer's office a couple days ago, and they went through everything. They literally are making sure our pension, finally, I can't talk about the past, and if you don't have something good to say, you don't say anything, but going forward, we're in good hands with the new treasurer and his staff. They're doing a great job.
He's doing a
That's
good job.
great.
He's
Yes, he really is. Very smart guy.
And on a good note.